I have the pleasure of introducing tonight Joyce Mercado. Joyce is an active member of our local climate protection nonprofit, Community Action for Sustainable Alameda. She's lived in Alameda for about 30 years now. For CASA, she writes a monthly column on climate protection for the Alameda Sun, and she also created what I find a very useful climate protection checklist. She completed climate reality project leadership training led by Al Gore and joins thousands of other climate reality leaders to give climate protection and sustainable presentations like this one. I first met Joyce through Golden Gate Audubon Society, where she's worked to raise awareness of the wonder of birds and the need to protect them, something dear to my heart. I know you'll find her presentation informative and encouraging. So go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate the introductions, Allison and Linda. And I appreciate Sarah manning the chat room for us for questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, there we go. This is the agenda for today. We're going to go over the causes of climate change, the fact that global temperatures are increasing, the impact of global climate change, the fact that we've got solutions available now. We don't need to invent things. We have solutions available now to address the problem. And then we'll close with developing a personal action plan. So this is a picture of the Earth's atmosphere from an Apollo mission. And you can see the blue band there is our atmosphere. And as you can see, it's a very thin band of blue light there. It's not, the atmosphere isn't as expansive as one might think. And how does global warming work in the first place? Well, we have the solar radiation coming in and hitting the Earth. And then 48% of that energy is absorbed by the Earth's surface. 23% is absorbed in the atmosphere, and 29% gets reflected back out to space. And this is a good thing because it keeps the Earth habitable. But the problem is this is a very delicate balance. And we've been spewing 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into that thin blue shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours. So we're altering the, as we alter the atmosphere, we have more concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. More of that outgoing infrared radiation is trapped and reflected back to the Earth, so thereby causing the Earth to warm unnaturally. So what are the sources of the biggest sources of greenhouse gases? Well, this chart is a demonstration of all the different types of sources. But in the US, transportation makes up 27% of the emissions. Electricity generation makes up 25%. Industry makes up 24%. Commercial and residential buildings make up 13%, and agriculture makes up the remaining 11%. That's from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The largest source of global warming pollution is the burning of fossil fuels, and you can see that it really picked up after World War II, and we are now producing more carbon dioxide than we have in the past 66 million years. This chart shows the correlation between the concentration of carbon dioxide in blue and the Earth's temperature in white over the last 800,000 years. And you can see that the correlation isn't perfect, but it's pretty close. And the problem is that now we're at a carbon dioxide concentration of 417 parts per million. This is the chart that got me alarmed when I saw it in the National Geographic many years ago and realized I needed to do more than change my light bulbs. And I got very involved in CASA and Bike Walk Alameda and so forth, including working on my own carbon footprint. 19 of the hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2002. And the hottest of all have been the last 7 years. So we're experiencing a growth in temperature increases. The temperature at the North Pole was 50 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than normal in February of 2018. This is the heat increase is exacerbated at the poles. In Seymour Island in Antarctica, the temperature was almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit in February of 2020, a new record for Antarctica. So now that we understand that the temperatures are increasing, let's look at the impacts of global climate change. And this can be the disconcerting part of the presentation, because there's a lot of negative impacts, but keep in mind that we're going to get to solutions and your personal action plan and what you can do about it. First off, with the additional warming at the poles, we're experiencing Antarctic ice loss. So you can see that that is increasing over the decades. And a similar thing is happening with declining ice mass in Greenland. And all of that melted ice has to go somewhere, all that water has to go somewhere, and it's causing sea level rise. So this is the top 10 cities that are at risk from sea level rise in 2070. But and you can notice one of them is Miami, and it's but 2015, Miami Beach, Florida. This is a nice sunny day. There was no hurricane, there was no downpour. This is all high tide in Miami. So we're already experiencing sea level rise impacts. Okay, let me get rid of this slide. Kiribati in the Pacific is the first nation to purchase land in another country to house its climate refugees because of sea level rise. This chart shows you the global ocean heat content change since the 1960s. And half of this increase has occurred in the last 20 years. This is by depth in the ocean. And how does climate crisis impact hurricanes? These warmer oceans lead to more intense hurricanes. The hurricanes are intensifying much more rapidly. The warmer the air, the more moisture it holds, leading to heavier downpours. Storm surges increase due to sea level rise. And lastly, a wavier jet stream can hold the storm in place much longer. And this is exactly what happened with Hurricane Harvey. It crossed waters in the Gulf of Mexico that were 7 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than normal. So as that happened, the storm rolled into Houston and stayed there for 5 days, dropping over 30 inches of rain over the 5-day period, causing massive flooding. Here is a resident being evacuated out of Houston due to the flooding. And in fact, if you look at the records in Houston between May of 2015 and 2019, they had 3 1 in 500 year floods and 2 1 in 1,000 year floods. So these floods that are only supposed to be happening very rarely are now happening with frequency. And the warmer air can hold a lot more water vapor. With each additional 1 degree Celsius of temperature, the atmosphere's capacity to hold water vapor increases by 7%. So there's already 5% more water vapor over the oceans than there was only 30 years ago. So this leads to what they call rain bombs. And here's a rain bomb in Midland, Texas. This is happening all over the world. This is in Seoul, Germany in July of last year. Killed at least, severe flooding in Western Europe killed at least 220 people. And in England, Britain experienced unprecedented flooding in February of last year as it was hit by 3 major storms in a row. And October of 2020 was UK's wettest day on record. And this is another example in Mexico. And then the same extra heat that evaporates more water from the ocean, causing bigger downpours and floods, pulls moisture even more quickly from the soil, causing droughts. So this is from April, data from April of 2021, 78% of the US West is experiencing moderate to exceptional drought. The darker the red, the more intense the drought is. So Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada are particularly hard hit. And 93% of California is currently in drought. It's also affecting groundwater levels in Europe. The redder it is, then the less groundwater is left. So the dark red is less than 2% left of the groundwater. So this is getting a very alarmingly low levels. And the fire season in the US West is now 105 days longer than in the 1980s. So what causes this? Well, spring is starting earlier and summer is lasting longer. The warmer temperatures dry out the plants through a process of transpiration. The more warm it is, for each degree Celsius warming, you get a 12% increase in lightning strikes, and which can start fires. And lastly, there's new evidence that global warming is causing an increase in winds, which exacerbates fires. And this isn't just happening in the US West, it's happening all over. So here, this is in Spain in August of last year. This is in Turkey. More than 130 fires ignited in Turkey in one 7-day period last year. This is Argentina. Burned thousands of hectares in Argentina. In Australia. So you get the idea that this is happening all over the world. And if you look at worldwide extreme weather catastrophes, the bar on the right is today, and the bars on the left is 1980. Red is extreme temperatures, droughts, and fires. Blue is floods and mudslides, and yellow is storms. And you can see that today we're experiencing more than 4 times as many of these worldwide extreme weather catastrophes as we were back in 1980. This is from the U.S. Department of Defense. Climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees and resources, and destruction by natural disasters in regions across the globe. How does climate change affect the food supply? Well, in lots of different ways. I'll just go over a few of them. First off, droughts lead to less yields. So wheat yields were down in Kansas as the state coped with drought. In Madagascar, more than 1 million people are facing famine or food insecurity due to back-to-back droughts. And more diseases are becoming more prevalent. Leaf rust, which thrives in higher temperatures and humidity, can lead to crop losses of 20 to 30% more. And these 4 crops lead to, let me see if I get this down. Nope, can't get it down. It's about 70% of the caloric intake of humanity is by these 4 crops. And so these are the projected yield declines for each degree Celsius of warming. So that does not bode well for the future of feeding humanity. How does climate change affect health? We've already talked about food. Let's see some other things that how it affects health. Well, heat waves can be deadly. So 138 people died in Japan during their heat wave in 2018. There's heat waves going along in Europe right now, causing problems. More than half of the people in the US live in counties that don't meet EPA air quality standards. I didn't realize it was quite that bad. This is New Delhi, India. Roughly 1.24 million people died in 2017 from air pollution in India, 13% of all deaths. So if you're breathing that nasty air, it's no wonder. Climate change also increases the risk of many waterborne infectious diseases, such as these here. In fact, of the most recent outbreaks of water infectious diseases in the US, 2/3 of them were preceded by heavy precipitation events. The world, as the ocean absorbs the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, some of it's absorbed by the ocean, it creates carbonic acid. So the world's oceans are now 30% more acidic on average than they were before the Industrial Revolution. And this affects the marine life. So the acidic water dissolves the shells of these tiny free-swimming marine snails that provide food for fish. So we're affecting the food chain. And the Great Barrier Reef has lost half of its coral cover in the last 30 years and 30% just since 2016. So again, an acceleration. Then 40 to 60% of the fish species are at risk by the end of the century. As the water warms up, it'll get too warm to support them during their spawning and embryonic life stages. We're even at risk to lose up to 50% of all land-based species in this century, in part due to climate change. So you can see the cost of carbon are many. In fact, it's the #1 threat to the global economy. If you look at this chart, it's from the New York Times, a fairly recent article in the New York Times. It shows historical emissions in time going along the x-axis, and time going along the x-axis, and the y-axis is gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. So you see the black line is the historical emissions. The purple band is pre-2015 policies that countries worldwide had adopted. That would lead to 3.6 to 4.2 degrees Celsius warming by 2100, not nearly good enough. Current policies lead to 2.7 to 3.1 degrees Celsius. The most recently pledged policies lead to 2.1 to 2.4 degrees Celsius, but where we need to get is to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius, and in order to avoid the worst catastrophes. That's what the scientists are saying. We need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we're already have reached 1.1 degrees Celsius increase. But the good news is we have solutions at hand. The cost of clean energy technology in the US has gone down. Residential solar has gone down 59%. Utility scale solar has gone down 74%. Wind has gone down 75%. Electric vehicle batteries has gone down 82%. and LED light bulbs have gone down 94%. In fact, if you look at the levelized cost of energy in the US, the renewable energy is, and by levelized cost, I mean taking out the subsidies. If we remove subsidies, renewable energy, solar and wind come out much less expensive than nuclear, coal, and gas-powered conventional methods. So with the cost coming down, the capacity's gone up of renewables, including global wind energy capacity. This really shot up. This is in Brandenburg, Germany. Renewables produced 56% of Germany's electricity in the first half of 2020. World solar installations have gone up even more dramatically. And more than 20% of the houses in Australia have solar panels on them. I think we should lead, we should follow their lead on that one. And then the low entry cost of solar panels, the small solar panels, make them affordable for developing countries. Here is a natural gas powered plant that's shutting down 20 years ahead of schedule because it can't compete economically with wind and solar electricity. These are new coal plants that are proposed and defeated. These are existing plants that have been retired. This is the retirement announced. And so these are all coal plants that have been canceled in the US. Electric cars on the road are growing. So this includes straight electric vehicles as well as plug-in hybrid EVs. And these are countries planning a fossil fuel vehicle phase out. So quite a few countries. And it used to be that just a handful of companies were producing electric vehicles, but now most everybody is. And GM has announced it's going to phase out all gasoline and diesel powered passenger vehicles by 2035. More and more people are bicycling and walking to get around. That's a zero emissions way of transportation. And LED lights have gone up to about 95% of the market. And cumulative global investment in commercial building energy efficiency retrofits for total $959 billion from 2000, I think it was 11 to 2023. Over 180 global companies have made a commitment to go to 100% renewable. Here are some of those companies. So it's quite a few companies. And there's been a new initiative at the beginning of 2020 that the World Economic Forum launched a global initiative to plant 1 trillion trees. This is a climate walk that was related to a UN conference on climate, where over 400,000 people showed up to protest to protect the climate. So now I'm going to go into some of what's happening locally in terms of solutions. So the city of Alameda has been really focused on climate protection. They've adopted a zero waste plan, and now we divert 79% of our garbage to either recycling or composting as of 2018. And as of the beginning of this year, Alameda Municipal Power now is 100% renewable sources of energy. The city instituted a policy where they require all electric new construction with EV chargers. And they did a couple of models for the public by the new Cousy Rec Center constructed as all electric, and they swapped out the gas appliances in the West End Library to all electric. There's a new bus route to Seaplane Lagoon Ferry at line 78. And they've put in more bikeways, 6 miles of bikeways since 2018, 50 miles of bikeways total. And beginning of next year, the gas-powered leaf blower ban will go into effect. And we've got 19,500 street trees, city street trees planted. Bike Walk Alameda runs an annual Bike to Wherever Day. And they do advocacy work. So we helped on getting a shoreline cycle track instituted, the Cross Alameda Trail, the Grand and Otis protected intersection, as well as slow streets. So trying to get people out of their vehicles and onto their bikes or walking. Community Action for Sustainable Alameda. We created a climate protection checklist and resource list that I'm going to go over in a bit. I also write the monthly climate protection column in the Alameda Sun. There's a reusable food containers restaurant campaign going on. We've got about 5 restaurants signed up for that. This was in conjunction with Alameda High School. And we have played a big role in the climate action and resiliency plan adopted by the city. And we pay for summer intern program with the city and CASA to do things like, one of the summer interns this year is organizing Alameda High School environmental clubs to go across Alameda and share ideas and work on projects together and so forth. 100,000 Trees for Humanity is all about planting trees. So they have an agreement to plant 100,000 trees in San Leandro. They're planting 400 redwoods in partnership with Cal Berkeley Haas School of Business. And they planted 75 trees in Alameda's parks. And last but certainly not least, Alameda Backyard Growers. You guys have a really good program. Several of your programs directly impact the climate, protecting the climate, including your free seed library program, which encourages people to grow their own local food. So there's no food miles associated with it. And the Project Clean Pick Glean program, where in 2020 you saved over 8,100 pounds of food to go divert to the food bank. And right now, 40% of our food is wasted. So you're saving an awful lot of food that would otherwise have gone wasted, which helps protect the climate. And you hold informational meetings and article series in the Alameda Sun, help educate people about growing their own food and maintaining their trees, their fruit trees. So way to go, Alameda Backyard Growers. So now let's discuss how to join those who are using their voices, their votes, their choices to fight for the future, their community, and their world. So here's a checklist, and I'll put this in the chat after I'm done with the presentation. A link to it on our CASA website. But this is a checklist of things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint and to protect the climate. So the most important thing is reducing how much we drive, because there was a study done in Alameda about the sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and by far the biggest sector, coming in at 79%, is transportation sector. So that's why it's the most important thing we need to do, is to figure out how to drive less. So we can bike or walk, take public transit, carpool and share rides for things besides just work. Work from home if possible, even if it's 1 or 2 days per week. And if you're going to, your next car, get an electric vehicle, because it's with Alameda Municipal Power being 100% renewables, it truly is a zero emissions vehicle. And we can drive more efficiently by clearing out items from your car that you don't need to carry around. I've been guilty of that. Checking your tire pressure monthly can save up to 3% of your gas mileage. And one thing that is also is the UPS trick, where you organize your route in a clockwise pattern to minimize left-hand turns. Then the next area of conservation is of importance in Alameda is natural gas usage. So the ultimate solution to that is to swap out your gas appliances with electric appliances as they age out. So that's the ultimate solution, but there's many things you can do in the meantime. Probably the biggest user is your heater. So insulating the attic, using caulking and weather stripping windows and exterior doors, replacing your furnace filters at least every hour of the month when in use, or check them anyway to make sure that they don't need replacing. Then only wash full loads of laundry and dishwasher. And when you do laundry, wash and rinse with cold water instead of hot water, because the bulk of the energy used to do a load of laundry is heating up the gas required to heat up the water. And today's detergents are formulated to work in cold water, and it's actually easier on your clothes, less harsh on your clothes, and so your clothing will last longer too. Then the next area would be your, it's still important to cut back on electricity usage, because we want to be able to keep amps sources 100% renewable as more people put electric vehicles online. So things like solar panels are very helpful, and changing the light bulbs to LED light bulbs. So next area is reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot, the 4 R's. The concept here is that everything that we use or consume takes energy to get the raw materials, manufacture it, ship it, and ultimately dispose of it. So the less stuff that we use, the better, the lower the emissions. So best to buy used for made from recycled material products instead of new products. It's good that you recycle your junk mail, but even better to reduce the junk mail you get in the first place by calling the catalog companies and the other companies that send you junk mail and asking to be removed from their list. Switching to paperless billing. Not getting bottled water, buy reusable bottles and use tap water instead. East Bay mud water is pretty delicious. Reusing cloth bags instead of paper or plastic for all shopping, and reusing a mug for coffee and tea instead of paper cups. And then on your recycling, when you put paper, plastic, glass, and metal in the blue bin, it's important to rinse out the cans and jars so that the food particles don't cross-contaminate the paper. So that's crucial. And then on the green bin, it's not just for yard trimmings, but it's for food and food soiled paper. They also go in the green bin. And this is very important because if that stuff gets into the landfill, it creates methane gas, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And one of the most important things we can do too is change how we eat. So eating a plant-based diet, and especially avoiding beef, lamb, and palm oil are essential. Beef and lamb burp up methane gas, and palm oil is leading to the destruction of the rainforest by planting palm trees. And it's just much more efficient. It takes an awful lot of land to handle livestock, not only for grazing, but for growing their feed. And it's much more efficient to just eat the plants in the first place rather than going through the animal products. Planting lots of trees and growing your vegetable garden, fruit and vegetable garden. It's the only thing that's in this list that actually reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So that's really important. But probably the most important thing to do is because we need to get policies changed to limit our increase in temperature to that 1.5 degrees Celsius, is to vote and campaign for environmentally minded officials up and down the ballot. And then after they're elected, contact them with frequency to let them know that climate change matters to you. And then we can volunteer and donate to organizations which protect the climate, like the ones that I went through today, like you're doing with Alameda Backyard Growers. And that's what I had to present. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing. And then Sarah's going to queue up questions for me. Oh, I need to put that checklist website in here for you.
That would be great. That was actually a question.
There it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So you were just talking about greenhouse gases. I'm wondering if you can talk about the impact of additional greenhouse gases when at the poles, right? When it's exacerbated at the poles.
Well, let's see. I think a lot of that has to do with the ice melting, and the ice normally would reflect the light back and the energy back, but as more ice is melted, it turns into the ocean, which is a darker color, and so it absorbs more of the heat. And so it's making the ice melting is making this whole thing worse at the poles.
Right. And we had another question about talking about how electric car battery disposal is dealt with. Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, I don't have expertise on how car batteries can be disposed of.
Okay, that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a couple folks wanted to let everyone know that on Facebook, there is a Buy Nothing Alameda page, and that's also very similar to Free Cycle or kind of the free pages on Craigslist and all of those places. And it's super local. I think they have it divided up by neighborhood even now. And so they're asking folks to live in the neighborhood that they're exchanging with. And that is also a way to navigate kind of emissions and traveling and all of those things.
Oh, that's wonderful. I will add that to the checklist on the resources. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, of course.
Buy Nothing Alameda. Okay.
Yeah. I'll open it up to anyone else that has any other questions that they are welcome to unmute themselves and ask Joyce now. Sometimes that can be easier than typing it out. Joyce, I know you have an expertise with birds and with the Audubon Society. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of climate change to our feathery friends, please?
Yes, unfortunately, birds are at great risk due to climate change, including extinction. I'm trying to remember the figure, but it was at least 50% of the birds are at risk of extinction by the end of the century if we don't do something about climate change.
Wow.
So, and we've had a lot of bird loss, not just eliminating a species, but the quantity of birds in the individual category of a bird has gone down a lot since the 1980s.
And so can you trickle that out for us just slightly of like, so 50% of bird species becomes extinct. What does that mean? What does that look like as we continue to exist here in some form or fashion?
Well, when you start taking things out of the environment, then you have ripple effects with other species.
Mhm.
So that's an effect. And I think it's also kind of interesting to see what is actually causing some of the demise of the birds. Is now spring is coming earlier, but the birds' timing is the bird timing now is getting screwed up when they migrate. So when they get to the place of migration, before it was timed with a certain suitable food source being available. But now that their timing is off, the food source is no longer available. It already had peaked. And so then the birds don't have food to eat.
Mm.
Or in Antarctica, the albatrosses, the increase in wind is knocking the albatross chicks out of their nests, which are kind of mound things built on the ground.
Mhm.
And if the chick is out of the nest, the adult doesn't recognize it as their chick and will not care for it. So the poor little chick has to get back into the nest, which is very hard for it to do. So those are just a couple of examples of how climate change is affecting bird populations.
Totally. Joyce, does it make sense to replace appliances that still work fine?
I would not.
Yeah,
I would not do that. I would wait
but
until
that you want to like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I wouldn't replace them until they age out. So as your water heater dies, replace it with a heat pump. As your heater dies, replace it with a heat pump furnace. Or your stove, replace it with an electric model.
Right.
Because it does take a lot of energy to create one of those stoves and dispose of it. So, or any of those appliances. So I think it makes sense to do it as you are doing, as the appliances age out. Oh, and somebody put in here is 2/3 of birds. I knew it was bad. I couldn't remember how bad.
Yeah, that's Linda.
Thank you, Linda.
And so there's also a note, Sheila had asked a question and Molly has responded. You all should read that. That's a big, long article piece. And super helpful. I think Birgit also mentioned about food waste and how important that is. And I am in full agreement with her about how much fertilizer and water and pesticides are often used in growing food. And so although it's a great thing to end up putting it into a green bin to compost it, if we can actually not get it to waste and actually just purchase what we need, that's a really big piece in the puzzle of food waste and how that trickles out into global warming, where food is trucked from very many miles away and has touched many hands and done a lot of a big journey to get to us, only for us to purchase it in a store and then throw it in our green bin.
Yeah, it is on one of the items on my checklist. I just didn't cover it, but
yeah.
But it's a very important one because in the U.S., agriculture is 11% of emissions.
Yeah.
So, and we waste 40% of the food. So if we could eliminate that 40%, that's like eliminating 4.4 percentage points of emissions in the U.S.
Right.
Of total emissions in the U.S.
Right.
So I agree with Birgit, I'm sorry. That's a tremendous area to focus on, is reducing food waste.
Totally. And I'll just give a plug to stopwaste.org in Oakland. They do a lot of work around food waste. And if food waste is an issue. I realize this isn't my talk, by the way, but I'm talking now. Sorry. But they do a lot of work around food waste and how to think about it in your own kitchen and in your own home. And they have tons of like handy tools to navigate that. And also like, how do you store things, right?
Mhm.
You buy $8 worth of strawberries in a plastic container from Trader Joe's and you get them home. And because of improper storage, they go bad quickly, and how to navigate some of those pieces as well. Their website can be super helpful and informative around that. So it's stopwaste.org, and I will also drop that into the chat.
And there's also on my checklist on the resources section, the second page has some helpful information on reducing food waste. And maybe it's stopwaste.org. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Awesome. Great. All right. I think I got everyone's question. If I didn't, feel free to again unmute yourself and ask the questions now. I will say to my colleagues in Alameda Backyard Growers, Jet had a great suggestion about it being helpful if we could include a discussion about how to make our gardens insect and bird friendly. So make note of those things perhaps for another educational talk in the future. All right. Allison or Linda?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Joyce, thank you so very much. That was a very informative and very timely talk. Obviously, we're very pleased that you were able to present it tonight and that we had a good turnout of people from the Bay Area who are interested in that topic. Sarah and Linda, thank you so much for your help with this presentation. I do want to mention a couple other things. One is that on August 20th, Alameda Backyard Growers is going to be hosting a tree pruning workshop at Farm to Market between 10 a.m. and 12 noon here in Alameda. We'll have information about that in our newsletter and on our website, on our Facebook page and Instagram as well. It's going to be an Eventbrite event and you can sign up for it. And frankly, that's another good way to reduce waste, is to learn how to take care of your trees, especially your fruit trees, so that you can have food that you can enjoy year in and year out, and that it's not wasted, and that the fruit that you perhaps even have Alameda Backyard Growers come pick to donate to the local food bank, that it's in better condition than if you had not learned how to prune your own trees. So I'm putting in a plug for learning how to do that. And that's coming up August 20th as our next Alameda Backyard Growers event. Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate your support and your interest. This has been recorded. It will be available on our website. People are still putting some things in the chat room. Do you want to mention any of those things, Sarah, before we sign off?
Say the question again. Sorry, I was reading.
Anything new in the chat room? Anything new in the chat room as I was talking that should be?
Oh, actually, yes, thank you. So Jet, you had mentioned the bird and insect friendly garden. I honestly don't remember this. So Linda, thank you for this note. ABG did a presentation on how native plants can bring birds to your garden. And that presentation is also on the website. I can also drop that into the chat, at least the page where all of the videos can be, you can look through them. So give me just a second. But that was the last comment and question.
And thank you all for coming. Please check our website, alamedabackyardgrowers.org, for anything that you want to see again or hear again. Joyce, thank you so very much. Sarah, thank you. Linda, thank you. Stay tuned for follow-up events and announcements in our monthly newsletter. Thank you all. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.